We're back. We are back in action. I got a new computer. It cost me a small fortune, but I got like the best computer money can buy right now pretty much, so I'm pretty excited about that. So we're going to play some awesome games on the gaming channel. Check it out if you haven't already. But today we're reacting to why we don't know why space is bad for our eyes by SciShow. Let's dive right in. I have no idea why space isn't bad for our eyes. Why it is bad for our eyes. Whatever. I have no clue. I never heard that before. Let's find out.
One of the best parts of spaceflight is the view. But if you're on a long journey to Mars, you might find your eyesight getting worse as you go, thanks to something called spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome.
That's a mouthful. I have not actually heard about this before, about your eyesight deteriorating or getting worse in any way during spaceflight. So this is news to me. However, if I'm going to take a guess before they explain it to us, I'm going to assume that it has something to do with the extra radiation of space and that damaging something in your eyes. That's a total guess though. I don't think that anything eye related would be tied to gravity that I can think of. So that's going to be my guess, is it's radiation related, because obviously there's a lot more radiation in space. We don't have an atmosphere protecting us. We don't have a magnetosphere protecting us. It's just, you know, a small ship's hull protecting us, which is nothing really. So,
or SANS for short. I just like to call it space eyes. The weird thing is, scientists still don't know what causes space eyes, or SANS. We should probably just call it SANS. That's what it's actually called.
Oh.
And while missing out on awesome views is disappointing,
so we really don't know.
Health is a much bigger issue. So before we send people off into the final frontier, we should probably solve one of the biggest problems of space medicine.
I love how with space you can just throw the word space in front of any word, and it sounds super high-tech and futuristic, but all it is the same thing in space. In space. I'm sorry, I got so much energy. I'm just happy to be back.
SANS tends to manifest as blurry vision, but it's actually an umbrella term that describes a collection of changes to an astronaut's eyes and brain. Inside the eyes, you can get a bunch of symptoms, like swelling where the optic nerve enters the eye, folding of the retina, which is the part of the eye that receives images, or flattening of the back of the eye. Meanwhile, further inside your head, the brain might move toward the top of the skull. The pituitary gland, which regulates a bunch of hormones in your body, might change shape. The cerebrospinal fluid that flows around your brain might get redistributed, and more.
Now that actually makes sense to me, the whole brain moving up in your skull a little bit more, because, you know, we are creatures that evolved on our feet. And we're used to the constant pressure of gravity pressing down on us, on everything about us. Now your skull and your skeletal structure, that's a little more rigid. So, you know, it's going to have a lot more resistance against gravity. It's stronger. But your brain is soft and squishy. It doesn't have that much support on its own. It doesn't have that structural strength that your skeletal structure does. So it makes sense to me that in a low gravity or no gravity environment, that would decompress a little bit and raise up in your skull cavity. That makes 100% to me. But the part that still confuses me is I don't see how that's tied to some of the eye problems that they're talking about, or how that could be gravity related, unless it's an agitation from those changes and the decompression from the lack of gravity that's happening up there, maybe cascading down a little bit, right? Because our structures here are extremely complex. So it's very likely that it could be impacted in a way that we just don't understand yet.
There's a lot that might happen, but any one astronaut can experience none of these changes or all of them. And the longer someone is in space, the risk for developing SANS appears to increase. Now the good news is that after most astronauts get back to Earth, their vision completely recovers. But the underlying structural changes might stick around for years, and the effects can be cumulative if they end up going back to space. For example, one astronaut who did a 6-month spaceflight came home with folds on his retina. By the time he went on his next flight, spaceflight 9 years later, the folds were still there but had lessened dramatically. But after another 6 months in space, those folds had not only come back, there were even more folds, plus some new swelling too.
Oh.
All of this means that a trip to Mars, which could take over 2 years if it's a round trip, won't be easy on the eyes. So it's at the top of the list of things space medicine researchers need to figure out.
Especially if that drastic of a change can happen in 6 months. Now picture a 2-year journey to Mars, which has different gravity. So then on top of the journey, now you have the destination to worry about. Super hostile environment, super crazy logistical challenges, and different gravity, different atmospheric pressure, different everything, right?
Because despite how prevalent SANS is among astronauts, we don't actually know very much about it. In part, that's because we haven't been studying it for very long. NASA has known about vision issues in astronauts since the late 80s, but studies describing this specific set of symptoms weren't produced until 2011. Since then, researchers have been doing a bunch of different kinds of tests, both right before and after spaceflight missions. I'm talking vision tests, MRIs of the head and eyes, and ultrasounds.
MRIs
and don't forget
are
the
so
lumbar
cool.
punctures. I'm sure those are super fun. But some of these tests can even be done during spaceflight.
I'm actually absolutely terrified of needles. I don't know why. It's an irrational fear. They don't hurt most of the time, like when you get little shots or they're drawing your blood or whatever. It doesn't hurt. The blood isn't what bothers me, which is what you would probably think it was. It's just the idea of a needle. I can get cut, no problem. I can get hurt in any other way, no problem. But needles, I can't even imagine like getting a spinal tap and having to have that giant needle jammed into my back. I would honestly consider dying over having that. It would be a tough decision. And I really like living.
To see how things are changing in real time. But as of 2020, roughly 12 astronauts go into space each year. And that means all of these studies have really small sample sizes, and it takes a while to get enough data to draw any conclusions. So
I'm a little curious though, is that a problem that's persistent just in this part of the world? So is that a study done just by NASA, or is that in cooperation with other space agencies? Because even though the US is a melting pot of all these different races and whatnot, you know, we do have very subtle differences sometimes depending on where you are from in the world. And so I'd be very curious if like Asian astronauts have had that same type of impact, or if European astronauts from like Britain and stuff have had that same type of impact based on where you are in the world. There's a lot of other space programs other than NASA, so I would be very interested to see if that data correlated, or if it's more specific or more prevalent in a certain type of the world. Because if we could figure that out, I mean, we can take a huge bound into trying to identify it.
So figuring out ways to study SANS that don't require spaceflight is critical. Now, one option is parabolic flights with airplanes, which let passengers experience real microgravity, but only for roughly 20 seconds at a time. Another is dry immersion. This SciShow video is supported by Capital One.
I just restarted the video. Oh God, give me a second. Oh, where were we? Oh no. Okay, I think we're back to where we need to be. Maybe. Let's see.
Another is dry immersion.
I've not heard of that
simulates
before.
microgravity by submerging subjects in a water tank covered with stretchy waterproof fabric. So basically the science version of a waterbed, except you might have to stay in it for weeks. Some researchers are even putting donated...
Wait, you hold on a minute. Did I hear you right? You want to have test subjects stay in bed for weeks. Dude, where do I sign up for this? Come on. Volunteer right here. For science. I'll do it for science.
Human eyeballs directly into a device that mimics the conditions of space to see what happens. But the most common way to study SANS on Earth is with head-down tilt bed rest experiments. You probably already figured out what this is. You lie on your back while being tilted by 6 degrees so your head is lower than your feet. Then you just hang out there for months, if not a full year. And while you're hanging out, you can undergo the same testing that astronauts do, like MRIs and ultrasounds and lumbar punctures. But despite all these research techniques, scientists still don't know exactly what causes sands. One hypothesis is that it's related to space causing the pressure inside of your head to increase. In a microgravity environment, the fluids inside your body get all redistributed, including inside your skull.
That
Veins
makes
on
sense.
the surface of your brain can overfill with blood, and cerebrospinal fluid may have trouble draining out of the brain.
Long story short, our bodies are just not designed to handle space in any way, shape, or form. Everything about space is out to kill us. Every single thing about space is problematic.
These increase the overall pressure on your brain. But not every astronaut with SANS has this elevated pressure, and most that do don't have the other symptoms that usually accompany it. So another hypothesis is that microgravity changes how the cerebrospinal fluid functions, specifically how it flows and drains around the optic nerve. If something gets messed up there, trapping extra fluid in that spot, it could explain why other parts of the brain don't always experience a pressure increase. There's also some evidence that there may be a genetic component to SANS, and that some people are more at risk than others.
And that's kind of what I was talking about before with it'd be really interesting to see if that data correlated with other space agencies. But the liquid pressure part makes a lot of sense because once again, it's vastly different in space. Not only is there no gravity, of course, that's the very obvious one, but the pressure changes as well, which is something that maybe we don't always think about. And that pressure can redistribute the fluids in your body, like he was just saying. And it would make sense. You got a lot of fluids flowing through up here. So that makes a lot of sense. And I just reset the video again. Oh my God. We're back again. I got a new keyboard, right, to go with the new computer because it all matches with the lighting. I can control it all from one source. And the keyboard is a wireless keyboard, but also has a wired mode, which is very important to me because I hate changing batteries. But it's also very like lit up. Let's see if I can get this in camera. It's a LED too, right? So it's got the lighting that matches the computer and it matches the mouse, which is also wired and wireless too. But its layout is just like, obviously it's a standard keyboard, but everything's just a little off from where I'm used to having it. And that 0 button that start the video from the beginning is right next to where I keep resting my hand. And that's why I keep hitting it. So what I did now is I've turned number lock off. So if I hit 0, it shouldn't do anything. Okay, I think we're good. Let's get back into it.
And that some people are more at risk than others. In reality, it could very well be a combination of all of these things, plus others, which makes it really hard to untangle.
And that's very true. So I work with computers and networks a lot in a very technical setting. And one of the things that when I training people up or getting a problem escalated to me, one of the things that I try to beat into people's heads is you assuming that there's only one problem or one cause is almost always wrong. If you have a super complex issue and you can't explain it, there's probably more than one cause, and you have to be looking out for that. You can't be looking for a single thing that's going to take care of all of the different symptoms. You have to, if you do that and fall short and you're stuck, start looking for multiple things that explain all of the symptoms, because maybe there's more than one thing wrong. And I feel like that's the same situation here. It's very complex. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot that can go wrong. A lot of things working against us.
But we do need to untangle it, because right now NASA considers SANS a top human spaceflight risk. New tools are being developed that will allow astronauts to do more extensive testing in flight so that we can get a better idea of how SANS develops and diagnose astronauts early in that process. But we also need to know more about prevention and treatment. Diagnosing an astronaut with SANS while they're still in flight doesn't help us that much if there's nothing we can do about it. Some research has suggested that a lower body negative pressure device, something that surrounds the lower body and pulls fluid away from the head region, could be helpful for protecting against or treating SANS.
So it kind of simulates gravity in that sense and getting those fluids pushed down. That's actually ingenious. That's very ingenious.
Other suggested treatments include vitamin B supplements and even wearing swim goggles. Now, it's crucial that we can get SANS figured out, both because it's having lasting impacts on most of our current astronauts and because it makes space flights longer than a year really problematic. Once we do figure it out, though, the door will be open for astronauts to head to Mars sans vision problems. Thanks for watching the SciShow video. We make SciShow free to watch because we believe that education is a human right. Not to mention saving a little bit of money by watching free videos all around. Great.
They're amazing.
This video's sponsor has another way for you to save some money.
Save some money. Check out their sponsor. Check out the original video. Support these guys. I love them. They're great. This was an awesome video. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. It's really, really, really good to be back. I'm super pumped up if you can't tell. So check out my gaming channel if you haven't already. I appreciate you very much, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.